Brenda's laughter sliced through the elegant restaurant, a sound I hadn't heard directed at me in months, but now it was for her boss, Mr. Carlson, as he publicly dismantled my profession and my presence. My carefully chosen tie suddenly felt like a noose. "A man like you, John, is a charming little accessory," Carlson sneered, raising his glass. "Some women need a soft landing at home." Le Rouge shimmered under the city lights, a place Brenda had chosen for our 5th anniversary. I adjusted the knot of my best suit jacket, the wool feeling too heavy, too restrictive in the humid evening air. Inside, the hushed murmur of conversation and the clinking of crystal felt like a foreign language. Brenda, however, floated through the room in a slim black dress, a smile already fixed on her face as she spotted Mr. Carlson across the room. She fit here, I noticed, with the sleek lines and muted colors, while I stood slightly apart, a splash of everyday and a canvas of curated expense. Mr. Carlson rose from their table, a tall man with a silver watch, glinting under the soft light. He greeted Brenda with an air kiss near her ear, a familiar gesture. Brenda returned it with a soft touch to his arm. He then turned to me, his gaze sweeping over my tie. "John," he said, extending a hand that felt soft, fleshy. "Good to finally meet you." I gripped his hand briefly. "It's Frank, actually," I offered, my voice a little low, a little lost in the restaurant's background hum. "Mr. Carlson waved a dismissive hand. "Right, John. Details. Details." He didn't look at me again, his attention already back on Brenda, who had seated herself with an easy grace. He ordered for the table without asking either of us. "The chef's tasting menu," he announced to the waiter. "And a bottle of that 2017 Bordeaux. You know the one, Julian." Julian, the waiter, nodded with practiced reverence. Brenda gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod of agreement. I felt the heat rising in my collar. When Julian asked for our drink preferences, I cleared my throat. "I'll just have a beer, if you have a local lager," I said, my voice cutting through the sophisticated hum. The table went silent. Not a complete silence, but a sudden, stark absence of the easy conversation that had been flowing. Julian paused, his pen hovering over his pad, then glanced at Mr. Carlson. Brenda shifted in her seat. Mr. Carlson let out a short, sharp laugh. "A beer, John? How quaint." Brenda giggled then, a quick, almost nervous sound. "Oh, Frank," she said, her tone light, airy. "You're just so cute. Always so out of your element at these sorts of places." Her smile was tight, not quite reaching her eyes. Mr. Carlson took a sip of water. "So, John," he began, not looking at me, but at Brenda. "Brenda tells me you're a bug scientist? Is that right?" The word bug was drawn out, tasting like something unpleasant. "Entomologist," I corrected quietly. "I study insects," he chuckled again. "Right. Bugs. Fascinating. So vital. Someone has to do it, I suppose." Brenda offered another weak laugh, nodding along. "He's just a big teddy bear, Mr. Carlson," she said, reaching over to pat my arm, "not cut out for all this fancy dinner stuff." The touch felt less like affection, more like an attempt to keep me in my place. "Indeed," Mr. Carlson mused, leaning back in his chair. He looked at Brenda with an appreciative eye. "Successful women like Brenda, they need a soft landing at home. Someone to keep things simple." The implication hung heavy in the air, a silent judgment that my value was only in contrast to Brenda's rising star. My hands, resting on my knees under the table, began to tremble. I felt the blood rush to my head, a pressure building behind my eyes. The conversation continued, a blur of Brenda's work achievements and Mr. Carlson's industry insights. While I sat there, a guest at my own anniversary, a mute observer. Then, without conscious thought, I pushed my chair back. The scrape of wood on tile was too loud, drawing every eye in our vicinity. I stood, my legs feeling unsteady, my chest tight. "Brenda," I said, my voice coming out rougher than intended. She looked up, startled, her eyes wide with alarm. "Mr. Carlson stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting from genial contempt to mild annoyance. "What are we doing here?" I asked, looking directly at Brenda. "On our anniversary? With him?" My gaze flickered to Mr. Carlson, whose face remained impassive. "You're humiliating me." Brenda's hand shot out, grasping my arm. Her grip was tight, urgent. "Frank, please," she whispered, her voice laced with an edge I hadn't heard in years. "Not here. You're making a scene." Her eyes darted to Mr. Carlson, then to the other diners, concern for their perception overriding everything else. "A scene?" I retorted, pulling my arm away. "This whole evening is a scene. I thought we were partners, Brenda." I was wrong about that. She stood up then, facing me fully, her voice low and tight. "It's harmless teasing, Frank. You're overreacting. He's just playing around." Her words, meant to soothe, felt like a fresh wound. I didn't say anything more. I just turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving her standing there, the hushed murmur of Le Rouge closing in behind me. I found my car in the parking lot, the cool night air doing little to settle the churning in my gut. Moments later, Brenda appeared, her high heels clicking sharply on the asphalt. Her face was flushed, a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" she hissed, stopping a few feet from me. "He's an important connection, Frank." An important connection. The words were clipped, precise, and they laid bare her true concern. I leaned against the hood of my car, feeling the cold metal through my suit. The anger had left me, replaced by a profound, empty sadness. "I know exactly what I did, Brenda," I said, my voice quiet, almost defeated. "And I know what you did. I don't think we can fix this, not anymore." The night stretched out, dark and vast around us. The drive home from Le Rouge was a silent, suffocating affair. Brenda sat rigid in the passenger seat, her gaze fixed on the passing streetlights. The scent of her expensive perfume, normally a comfort, now felt like a barrier between us. The argument wasn't spoken, but it hung in the air, a dense, invisible fog that filled the car. When we finally pulled into the driveway, she got out without a word, slamming the door a little harder than necessary. Inside the house, the silence continued. She moved with purpose, taking off her dress, hanging it carefully, her back to me. "You ruined it, Frank," she finally said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion, as she folded her slip. "You just don't understand how important tonight was. How important Carlson is to my career." There was no mention of my hurt, no acknowledgement of the public humiliation. It was all about her, her career, her perception. I stood in the doorway, watching her, feeling a familiar coldness settle in my chest. This house, once a place of shared laughter and quiet evenings, now felt vast and empty. The warmth of our past had been replaced by a chilling, palpable distance. The weeks that followed were a blur of Brenda's increasing busyness. She started leaving earlier, coming home later. Weekends were often interrupted by urgent projects. The phrase "traveling for business" became a common refrain, usually followed by the casual mention of Mr. Carlson's involvement. "Mr. Carlson needs me in Chicago," she'd say. Or, "We have a big presentation in Indianapolis. Carlson insists I be there." I started noticing changes. A new silk blouse, an expensive watch, shoes that cost more than my weekly groceries. Her hair, always meticulously cared for, now had a professional sheen, her makeup a subtle polish. Her movements were more confident, her voice a little sharper on the phone. When I tried to talk, to bridge the growing gap, she would sigh, run a hand through her hair, and say, "Frank, I'm just so stressed with work. Can we not do this right now?" Her work demands, it seemed, were a wall, impenetrable and unyielding. One Tuesday morning, while Brenda was in Cleveland, I found a receipt tucked into the pocket of her work jacket. It was from a restaurant, a fancy Italian place. The date on it was for the Saturday before, a weekend when she had told me she was working alone at the office. The receipt was for 2 entrees, 2 glasses of expensive wine. My breath caught in my throat. When she returned, looking tired but exhilarated, I laid the receipt on the kitchen counter. "What's this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She picked it up, glanced at it, and then tossed it back down. "Client dinner, Frank. What do you think?" Her tone was dismissive, almost contemptuous. "On a Saturday? And for two?" I pressed. Her eyes narrowed. "Are you really going to start with this? Are you accusing me of something? You're being paranoid, Frank. This is exactly why you hold me back." The words, "hold me back," echoed Mr. Carlson's pronouncement from that disastrous anniversary dinner. A new battle started then, not external, but internal. I began to scrutinize. Her phone, left casually on the counter while she showered. Her laptop, sometimes left open. My hand would reach, hesitate, then take. I would scroll through texts, glance at emails, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and self-loathing. Each time, I found nothing explicit. Just more work-related chatter. More references to Mr. Carlson. More travel plans. Yet, the absence of proof did not alleviate the creeping dread. It only solidified the vague suspicion into something colder, harder. A truth I couldn't yet name. I spent more time in my small home office, surrounded by my insect specimens. The quiet world of entomology offered a stark contrast to Brenda's escalating, competitive realm. The precision of my work, the slow, deliberate study of nature, felt like a refuge. I found solace in the delicate patterns of a butterfly's wing, the intricate architecture of an ant colony. They were predictable, honest. One afternoon, my neighbor, Carol, stopped me while I was getting the mail. "Saw Brenda the other day," she chirped, a friendly smile on her face. "At the little cafe downtown. She was with her boss." The tall one. Looked like they were having a serious talk. Good for her. Getting out of the office for lunch. My stomach clenched. Brenda had told me she was working through lunch that day, alone, catching up on paperwork. The casual remark, meant innocently, felt like another piece of ice in a slowly freezing lake. My trust in Brenda, once a solid foundation, began to erode. Small cracks appeared, then spread, spider-webbing across the entire structure of our marriage. The thought of her with Mr. Carlson, not just as colleagues, but as something more, had taken root, a poisonous plant growing in the fertile ground of my suspicion. Then, for my birthday, Brenda gave me an expensive watch. It was sleek, modern, something I would never have chosen for myself. "Happy birthday, Frank," she said, her voice flat, as she handed me the small box. "I thought you needed something a little more executive." The gift was impersonal. A shallow attempt at peace, a gesture meant to smooth over the unspoken. But as I strapped the cold metal to my wrist, it only deepened my unease. It felt less like a gift and more like a symbol of the distance between us, a reminder of the two separate worlds we now inhabited. The Saturday morning was crisp, the sky a clear, pale blue over the quiet Midwestern town. Brenda had said she was meeting a client for brunch, a solo networking effort, but something in her tone, a slight inflection I couldn't quite place, made me hesitate. Instead of settling into my usual weekend routine, I found myself in my car, a careful distance behind her company vehicle. She drove through our town, then onto the highway, heading east, a direction that didn't align with her usual client territories. 20 minutes later, she pulled into the parking lot of the Grand Inn, a moderately upscale hotel in a town a little further out, the kind of place business travelers used for overnight stays. My stomach tightened into a knot, cold and hard. I parked a few rows back, angling my car to provide a clear view of the hotel entrance. I killed the engine. The silence in the car punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, warming the windshield. My hand cramped around the steering wheel. I watched the ebb and flow of guests, families with small children, couples checking in. Each person who walked through the automatic doors felt like a fresh stab of anxiety. 1,000 scenarios played out in my head, each one more painful than the last. The dread coiled tighter, tightening with every minute. Then, just past noon, they emerged. Brenda, her hair perfect, a new scarf draped elegantly around her neck. And beside her, Mr. Carlson, his silver watch catching the sunlight. They walked casually, their steps in sync, almost touching. Her hand brushed his arm as he laughed at something she said. It wasn't a business interaction. It was something else. Their body language was intimate. Undeniable. They stopped at the edge of the parking lot, near Mr. Carlson's luxury sedan. He reached for her, and she stepped into his embrace, her head resting for a moment on his shoulder. His hand stroked her back, a gentle, lingering touch. Then he kissed her. A brief, soft press of lips that stretched into a small, private moment. It was over quickly, a simple, quiet gesture, but it confirmed everything. My worst fears, until now abstract and formless, suddenly had shape, weight, and a devastating clarity. I started my car, the engine's roar surprisingly loud in the silent lot. The drive home was a blur, the neatly tilled fields, the occasional farmhouse, the familiar curves of the highway. They all swam through my tear-filled eyes. The image of their embrace played on an endless loop in my mind, a cruel, cinematic revelation. That night, the house felt heavy, oppressive. Brenda was already home, humming softly as she prepared dinner, an oblivious domesticity that felt like a mockery. I waited until after the small, forced meal, the silence punctuated by the clinking of forks. She cleared the plates, her back to me. "Brenda," I said, my voice hoarse. "Where were you this morning?" She froze, a plate suspended in her hand. "I told you, Frank. Client brunch." "Why?" I pulled a small, folded piece of paper from my pocket. It was a printout of the Grand Inn's website, showing their logo and address. I placed it on the table between us. "You were at the Grand Inn," I stated, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my hands. "With Mr. Carlson." She turned slowly, her face paling. Her eyes darted from the paper to my face. "What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. I had coffee with a client, then went to the office. You're imagining things, Frank." She tried to sound indignant, but her voice wavered. "It was just a drink. A quick business discussion. You're always making something out of nothing." "I saw you, Brenda," I said, the words heavy with a bitter truth. "I saw you walk out of that hotel with him. I saw him hold you. I saw him kiss you." I watched her face crumble, the practiced defenses falling away. Her eyes filled with tears, not of remorse, but of caught panic. She sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook. "Frank," she sobbed, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." She looked up, her face streaked with tears. "But you don't understand. I'm so unhappy. You've been so distant. You don't get my ambition. You don't see me." The excuses spilled out, a torrent of self-pity and blame, painting me as the architect of her betrayal. "He understands me, Frank," she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. "He sees what I can achieve. He makes me feel alive in a way you haven't in years." Each word was a fresh cut, a physical manifestation of betrayal. The pain in my gut was raw, gut-wrenching. "What's his first name?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Carlson. What's his first name?" I needed a name. A target for the rage that was building inside me. She shook her head, frantically. "No, Frank. Please. Don't. You can't. You'll ruin everything. My career. It's just getting started. Her job. Again. Always her job." A cold resolve settled over me then, a deep, chilling certainty. The sadness had begun to morph into something potent, a desire for justice that superseded everything else. This was no longer just about us. The house, once our sanctuary, now felt like a battleground. The fragile structure of our marriage had not just cracked, it had splintered into irreparable pieces. The guest room, usually reserved for out-of-town relatives, became my new bedroom. The shift was immediate, a symbolic distance mirroring the chasm that had opened between Brenda and me. The bed felt too big, the silence too loud. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by the image of Brenda in Mr. Carlson's arms, a scene that replayed with brutal clarity every time my eyes closed. Food lost its taste. I'd push a fork around a plate, the simple act of eating feeling like an insurmountable task. I avoided Brenda. Her presence in the kitchen, her voice on the phone, the scent of her perfume. Each was a fresh reminder of the deception. A constant, low-level hum of pain. I'd leave for work before she woke, stay in my office until late, or drive aimlessly, anything to avoid the strained silence of the house. One Saturday, I drove out to Paul's farm. The familiar smell of damp earth and animal feed offered a small comfort. Paul, my older brother, was a man of few words, his hands rough from years of working the land. We sat on his porch, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows over his fields. "Brenda's been busy," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Work takes up most of her time now. Feels like we're drifting apart." I couldn't bring myself to say more, the raw truth too ugly to articulate. Paul nodded slowly, chewing on a piece of straw. "Women get ambitious sometimes," he said, his gaze distant. "You gotta fight for what you got, Frank. Marriage ain't always easy. Takes work." He spoke of it like mending a fence, a practical problem with a practical solution. But my marriage felt less like a broken fence and more like a field poisoned beyond reclamation. It was gone, I thought. Tainted. Brenda continued her schedule, seemingly unburdened by her confession. She still left early, came home late, sometimes not at all, citing overnight trips, the casualness with which she moved through her days, as if nothing fundamental had changed, stoked a quiet, burning anger in me. I imagined confronting Mr. Carlson, walking into his office, saying exactly what I thought of him. The fantasy was vivid, satisfying, but I always reined it in, fearing a rash act that would only bring more complications. Instead, I found myself late one night, hunched over my laptop, typing divorce lawyers near me into the search bar, the legal terms that populated the screen. Dissolution, assets, custody, were cold, impersonal, a stark contrast to the emotional wreckage I felt inside. Each click, each new page, was another nail in the coffin of what I thought my life was. I'd catch myself staring at old photographs. Brenda and me on our wedding day, laughing on a hiking trip, her arm slung around my waist. I tried to reconcile the smiling, loving woman in those images with the woman who had just betrayed me. The two didn't fit, like pieces from different puzzles. Sometimes, the urge to simply pack a bag, walk out, and disappear from this life I no longer recognized was almost overwhelming. To simply vanish, to leave no trace. Brenda, in her own way, tried to talk. She'd sit across from me at the kitchen table, her voice soft, almost pleading. "Frank, we can work through this," she'd say. "We can move past this, if you're willing to try." Platitudes. Shallow reassurances. She spoke of working through it as if my profound hurt was merely an inconvenience, something I needed to get over for her comfort. I saw it as manipulative, another attempt to control the narrative, to soothe her own guilt without truly acknowledging the depth of my pain. An overwhelming sense of injustice settled deep within me. Not just the betrayal, but the casual disregard for the damage she had inflicted. The way she protected Mr. Carlson, the way she prioritized her career even now. They both needed to face consequences. They needed to pay. I started documenting everything. Dates she left, dates she returned. The name of the Grand Inn, the exact time I saw them. Any casual remark from a neighbor. Any slip of a tongue. I bought a small notebook, its pages filling slowly with neat, precise entries. My initial sadness, that raw, gut-wrenching pain, was subtly but irrevocably transforming. It was becoming a calculated, cold desire for justice, a need for them to pay the price. The entomologist in me, the one who meticulously catalogued and understood patterns, was now applying his skills to the unraveling of my own life. The decision to move forward, to actively seek retribution rather than merely endure, brought with it a cold clarity. My first step was a discreet phone call to Mr. Davies, a divorce lawyer recommended by a colleague from the university. Mr. Davies was a calm, older man with a methodical way of speaking. He listened without interruption as I laid out the bare bones of my situation. His advice was precise. Evidence, Mr. Miller, tangible, undeniable proof. The more you have, the stronger your position. He emphasized documented dates, locations, and any communication that supported my claims. So, I began my meticulous search. When Brenda was out for one of her late work nights, I combed through her things. Her laptop, left open and unguarded, revealed a hidden folder. Her phone, sometimes unlocked, held a cache of messages. Her work bag, usually neatly organized, sometimes contained stray receipts or planners. My hands moved with a chilling determination, and there it was. Not just vague suspicions, but concrete, damning proof. Emails exchanged between Brenda and Mr. Carlson, no longer formal but laced with pet names, my sweet Brenda, my brave John, and casual references to shared lunches, late-night dinners, and upcoming business trips that read more like romantic getaways. Future plans were discussed, not just for work, but for weekends, for an escape from their respective lives. The messages detailed their trysts with a sickening precision. The Grand Inn. On specific dates, a weekend conference in St. Louis that was extended by a day, a private dinner at a secluded restaurant an hour away. Each location, each date, a fresh wound. Then, I found it. Evidence of Brenda using her company expense account for what were clearly personal expenses related to the affair. Lavish meals for two, hotel room service charges that didn't align with her solo travel narratives, even a spa treatment listed vaguely as client wellness. My hands, usually steady, trembled as I made copies, took screenshots, and printed out the most damning exchanges. I organized it all into a plain manila folder, each piece of paper a silent testament to her deception. There was a grim satisfaction in the act, a sense of control returning, but beneath it, a profound emptiness settled. Each piece of evidence, each undeniable truth, hammered another nail into the coffin of our marriage, leaving no room for doubt or reconciliation. The end was not just coming, it was already here, laid out in black and white. Brenda, sensing a change in me, a newfound quiet intensity, seemed to misinterpret it. She thought I was getting over it. As she'd put it, one evening, she suggested a romantic getaway, a weekend retreat to patch things up. She spoke of it with a bright, hopeful tone, as if a change of scenery could simply erase months of betrayal. "It'll be good for us, Frank," she'd said, touching my arm. I pulled my arm away gently, my voice flat. "No, Brenda. That won't be necessary." Her face fell, a flicker of irritation replacing the hopeful smile. I drove out to Paul's farm again, the manila folder heavy on the passenger seat. This time, I didn't hold back. I laid out the full extent of the betrayal, the emails, the dates, the expenses. Paul listened, his weathered face impassive, his eyes fixed on the distant fields. When I finished, the silence stretched long and deep. He finally turned to me, his gaze direct. "Frank," he said, his voice gruff, "you deserve better than that. You always have." His simple, honest words, devoid of judgment or complex advice, solidified my resolve more than any lawyer's counsel. My research extended beyond divorce law. I meticulously looked into Mr. Carlson's company, digging into their corporate ethics policies. I found their detailed code of conduct, outlining strict rules against conflicts of interest, misuse of company funds, and workplace relationships that could compromise professional integrity. The consequences for such breaches were severe. Termination, legal action, damage to professional reputation. I understood then that exposing the affair wouldn't just affect Brenda and me. It could have devastating professional repercussions for both her and Mr. Carlson. The quiet divorce Mr. Davies had initially discussed now felt insufficient. My grief and anger had hardened into something sharper, more precise. I was no longer content with merely ending the marriage. I began to carefully plan my next move, aiming for maximum impact, for a dismantling that would mirror the thoroughness with which she had dismantled my life. I wanted them to truly pay the price. The date of the annual corporate awards ceremony arrived, a prestigious event Brenda had been talking about for weeks. It was held at the Grand Ballroom, downtown, a place of polished marble and crystal chandeliers. I knew Mr. Carlson would be there, a key figure. This, I decided, was the precise moment, the setting for maximum impact. For days, I refined my package of evidence. I distilled the most damning emails, the clearest expense report discrepancies, the most intimate text exchanges. I printed them out, arranged them logically, and clipped them together. Each sheet was a quiet weapon, aimed with cold precision. The envelope felt heavy in my hand, a physical manifestation of months of simmering resentment. I arrived at the Grand Ballroom dressed in my best suit, a suit Brenda had bought for me years ago. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. But my hands were steady. My resolve was a hard, unyielding core. The room was a glittering sea of faces, hushed conversations, and clinking glasses. Brenda and Mr. Carlson were near the front, laughing easily. Brenda's arm linked through his as they chatted with a group of executives. The sight was a fresh, painful reminder of my own humiliation at Le Rouge, fueling the controlled anger within me. I moved through the crowd, purposeful but not hurried, until I reached the periphery of their group. I had made a discreet call a few days prior, identifying myself as a concerned party, asking for a specific senior executive. That executive, a man named Mr. Henderson, was standing a little apart, talking on his phone. When he finished, I approached him. "Mr. Henderson?" "Frank Miller." He recognized my name. "Ah, Mr. Miller, good to finally meet you. What can I do for you?" I extended the envelope. "I believe this information concerns the professional conduct of two of your employees, Brenda Miller and a Mr. Carlson." He took the envelope, his brow furrowing slightly as he felt its weight. He opened it, his eyes quickly scanning the printed sheets. I watched his face, saw the subtle shift from polite interest to grim recognition. His gaze flickered from the documents to Brenda and Mr. Carlson, who were still oblivious, still laughing. I stepped forward then, my voice clear, cutting through the low hum of the room. "Brenda Miller, my wife, has been having an affair with Mr. Carlson, using company time and resources to facilitate it." The murmurs around us died. A palpable tension gripped the air. Every head turned. Brenda's face, which had been bright with laughter moments before, drained of color. Then, a furious flush spread across her cheeks. "Frank, what are you doing? This is a lie. He's crazy," she stammered, her voice high and desperate. Mr. Carlson, his face a mask of shock, stepped forward. "Now, wait a minute, John. This man is a crazed ex. He's clearly unstable." He tried to dismiss me, to wave me away. But Mr. Henderson's stern, unwavering gaze silenced him. The executive simply held up the documents, his expression cold and unimpressed. A security guard, alerted by the sudden shift in atmosphere, began to approach. I stood my ground, ensuring my message was heard by everyone now staring at us. "This isn't about craziness," I said, my voice steady. "It's about truth, about infidelity and corporate fraud." Brenda, her eyes wild with a desperate public rage, lunged at me. "You ruined my life. You ruined everything," she shrieked, her hands reaching for me. Someone held her back. The carefully constructed elegance of the event shattered. Amidst the gasps and murmurs, I calmly reiterated my claims, emphasizing Brenda's betrayal, her relentless career obsession, and the lengths she'd gone to keep it hidden. The scene devolved into chaos, the news spreading like wildfire among the shocked attendees. Two security guards firmly took my arms, escorting me towards the exit. But before I was out of sight, I turned back. Brenda was standing there, held back by a colleague, her face a mask of utter devastation, stained with tears, her public shame laid bare for all to see. Mr. Carlson stood beside her, his face ashen, his reputation dissolving around him. It was a look I knew I would never forget. The fallout was swift and absolute. I heard through the grapevine, a network of hushed whispers and averted gazes in our small town, that Brenda had been suspended the very next day. A week later, the official word came. Termination. Her high-paying job, the one she had prioritized above everything, was gone. Mr. Carlson, too, faced an internal investigation. Within days, his name was quietly removed from the company directory, his corner office reassigned. His reputation, once formidable, was in tatters. A cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. News of the scandal spread through our Midwestern community like wildfire. It became the main topic of conversation at the grocery store checkout lines, the hushed discussions at church potlucks, the knowing glances across the town square. Brenda's name, once associated with ambition and success, was now synonymous with disgrace. My phone rang constantly. Friends, colleagues, even distant relatives called. Some offered praise, calling me brave or strong. "You did the right thing, Frank," they'd say, their voices filled with a righteous indignation. Others expressed concern, their tones softer, asking if I was doing okay. Each call, each sympathetic word, brought a rush of vindication. Justice, I told myself, had finally been served. The public humiliation at Le Rouge, the quiet contempt, the years of feeling diminished. It had all led to this moment. But the triumph, that initial rush, was fleeting. It was quickly followed by a profound emptiness, a heavy quiet that settled over my life. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a stark, unsettling stillness. Then Brenda called. Her voice, usually composed and measured, was raw, distorted with hatred. "You ruined me, Frank," she spat, each word a venomous arrow. "You took everything. My career, my reputation. You made me nothing." There was no regret for her actions, only furious blame. "I'll make you pay for this, Frank. You'll regret what you did." Her threats, her vow for revenge, further poisoned the already toxic remnants of our relationship. I walked through the house, now truly empty. Brenda had moved out, taking her clothes, her expensive shoes, her sleek decor. The spaces she once filled were now hollow, echoing my solitude. The silence amplified my thoughts, each one circling back to the grand ballroom, to the moment of public unraveling. Was it worth it? I asked myself, staring at the empty side of our bed. Was the price Brenda paid, the cost of her professional ruin, truly worth my own peace? Paul visited a few days later. He sat in the living room, looking around at the silent, stripped-down space. He didn't say much, just observed. "You got what you wanted, didn't you, Frank?" he finally said, his voice soft. "But it don't look like it made you happy." He saw the hollowness behind my eyes, the quiet despair. "Now you gotta figure out how to heal. The fighting's over." His words were practical, grounded, but healing felt like an insurmountable climb. I struggled with the shift. For months, I had been an avenger, driven by a clear purpose. Now, that purpose was fulfilled, and I was simply left with broken pieces. The realization dawned slowly, chillingly. While Brenda had paid a professional price, losing her identity and her future, I, too, had lost a significant part of myself in the pursuit of her downfall. The man I was before, naive and trusting, was gone, replaced by someone colder, harder, someone capable of calculated cruelty. I confronted the moral ambiguities of my revenge. Had I righted a wrong, or merely caused more pain? The lines were blurred, indistinct. The satisfaction of winning, that momentary rush of vindication, had dissipated entirely. All that remained was the heavy weight of a shattered life, a hollow victory in a house that once held so much. The official divorce papers landed on my kitchen counter, a formal, cold end to what had once been a promise. The dates, the signatures, the legal jargon, it all marked the formal dissolution of our marriage, not with a bang, but with the rustle of official documents. Brenda, now unemployed and with her professional reputation in tatters, fought with a desperate aggression. Her once high-paying career was gone, and she turned her focus entirely to financial compensation. Her lawyer, a sharp, aggressive woman, tried to paint me as vengeful and unstable, using my public outburst at the awards ceremony as Exhibit A. Mr. Miller's irrational behavior, His public spectacle clearly indicates a pattern of instability, she argued, her voice cold and unyielding. But Mr. Davies, my lawyer, was methodical. He presented the overwhelming evidence: the printed emails, the damning text messages, the expense reports detailing corporate misconduct. Each piece of paper was a silent rebuttal to her lawyer's accusations. The legal process was a drawn-out, emotionally draining grind. Each court appearance, each deposition, forced me to relive the betrayal, to articulate the pain, to dissect the broken pieces of our life together. Brenda, sitting across the courtroom, was a shadow of her former self. Stripped of her professional identity, the poise and confidence she once possessed had vanished, replaced by a bitter, defensive shell. Her eyes, whenever they met mine, were full of accusation, never regret for the affair itself, only for its devastating consequences on her. She couldn't see beyond her own loss. As the weeks turned into months, my initial anger, that cold, hard resolve, began to mellow. It shifted into a deep-seated sadness. Not for Brenda, but for what our marriage could have been, for the future we had once planned. The dream of a quiet, shared life, now utterly unreachable. I started attending therapy. The therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Evans, listened patiently as I recounted the story, the infidelity, the revenge. She helped me grapple with the trauma, not just of the betrayal, but of the corrosive effect of my own actions. I began to understand my own role in our emotional distance, the ways I had perhaps allowed Brenda to drift, though never justifying her choice to betray. Understanding your part isn't excusing hers, Frank, Dr. Evans had said, her voice gentle. It's about finding your own path forward. The financial toll of the divorce became apparent. Lawyers' fees, separate living expenses, the division of assets. It all added another layer of stress to my life. Our house, the quiet suburban home we had bought together, was put on the market. The act of selling off shared assets, piece by piece, became a painful, yet necessary, symbol of my letting go of the past. The furniture, the garden tools, the old car, each item carried a memory, now to be untethered, released. In one of those empty rooms, as the last of Brenda's belongings were carted away, a moment of quiet strength settled over me. I realized I no longer needed Brenda's repentance, her apologies, her acknowledgments. They wouldn't change what happened. My peace wouldn't come from her, but from within. That realization, quiet and profound, was like a key turning in a lock. The narrative of my life was shifting. The focus turned inward, towards rebuilding. I recommitted to my entomology research, spending long hours in my lab, the intricate world of insects offering a predictable solace. The precise patterns, the logical order of nature, provided a balm to the chaos of my personal life. I started to see faint glimpses of a future independent of Brenda, a path I could forge for myself, slowly shedding the heavy weight of the past, like a cicada shedding its old skin. The final decree arrived by mail, a thin envelope containing the official stamp of dissolution. It was a quiet end to a tumultuous chapter. Delivered on a Tuesday afternoon, there was no fanfare, no dramatic pronouncement, just a few pages of legal jargon declaring me officially single. I felt a weary relief, a quiet closure, but no grand celebration. The long, drawn-out grind of the legal process had drained me of any capacity for triumph. Brenda had moved out of town weeks ago, disappearing from the community as swiftly as her reputation had crumbled. Her forwarding address was for a city a few states away, a place where she could perhaps start anew, though the trail of resentment and her shattered career would surely follow. Word also filtered through that Mr. Carlson had likewise moved on, taking a lesser position in a distant corporate branch. The scandal, it seemed, had cast a long shadow, refusing to be contained within the borders of our small Midwestern town. With the legal battle behind me, I dedicated myself fully to my work. My small lab at the university became a sanctuary. The intricate world of insects, a source of predictable order amidst the chaos I had experienced. I delved deeper into my research on beetle migration patterns, finding a quiet purpose in observation and study. The precise nature of entomology, the endless details of the natural world, offered a grounding counterpoint to the complexities of human emotion. Beyond work, I started volunteering at the local community garden. It was a dusty plot of land behind the library, where retired folks and young families tended rows of tomatoes and corn. There, under the Midwestern sun, with my hands in the soil, I connected with people in a new, unburdened way. Conversations were about crop rotation and pest control, simple exchanges devoid of pretense or hidden agendas. It was a different kind of connection, slower, more authentic. In those quiet moments, whether observing a beetle under a microscope or weeding a row of beans, I reflected on the nature of ambition, the sting of betrayal, and the heavy cost of exacting revenge. I recognized that while Brenda had faced severe consequences, her downfall had come at a price for me too. My own moral compass had been tested, bent, and ultimately reshaped. I carried the indelible scars of her betrayal, but also the hard-earned wisdom gained from confronting it head-on. I acknowledged the critical importance of self-respect, a lesson learned through bitter experience. To allow myself to be diminished, to let a festering resentment consume me, was a choice I vowed never to repeat. Sometimes, a song on the radio, a fleeting scent in a crowded place, would remind me of Brenda, but the emotional sting, once sharp and visceral, had lessened, becoming a dull ache, a distant memory rather than an immediate wound. I learned to appreciate the simpler, authentic connections in life. The steady friendship of Paul, the camaraderie at the garden, the quiet satisfaction of a solved research problem. Honesty, I now knew, was the bedrock of any genuine relationship, a value I held above all else. Occasionally, the thought of dating again would surface, hesitant and fragile. The idea of trusting someone new, of opening myself up to vulnerability, felt daunting. I understood that rebuilding that trust would be a slow, painstaking process, like tending a delicate sapling. One evening, after leaving the garden, I pulled my car over on a quiet country road. The sun was setting, painting the wide Midwestern field in hues of orange and purple. A gentle breeze rustled through the tall grasses. I watched the horizon, a sense of quiet contemplation settling over me. I was not happy in a dramatic, storybook sense. Happiness felt too grand, too volatile for what I had endured. But I lived with a sober acceptance of my past, the choices made, the consequences faced, and in that acceptance, there was a quiet hope, a genuine, if solitary, path stretching out before me. The last of the legal documents were signed, sealing the finality of it all. Brenda was a name from another life, a chapter closed with a quiet click. I hadn't seen her since she moved, her new address, a distant coordinate on a map. Mr. Carlson, too, faded into reports of a demotion, a lesser life in another state. Their consequences were real, visible, but my own victory had a bitter taste. The house, now truly my own, was filled with a quiet that bordered on emptiness. I continued my work, the beetles and their intricate lives a steady comfort. The garden brought a simple, honest rhythm to my days, the dirt under my fingernails a tangible reality. I learned that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, leaves its own scars. It doesn't bring back what was lost, only reshapes what remains. I was not the same man who had walked out of Le Rouge. I carried the weight of what happened, the choices made, my own included. There was no grand happiness, but a quiet acceptance, a sober understanding of a life that was now entirely my own. The future stretched out, unwritten, but filled with the slow, steady hum of possibility.